Hello and welcome to the Soul Shaking Love podcast. I'm Valerie Green from CoachValerieGreen.com, and this podcast is dedicated to bringing you the world's expert teachers to help you to feel that mind, body, and spirit connection, both with yourself and with your true love. And so today I am really excited to have a new guest on the show. Her name is Sanaiyah 𝐒𝐚𝐲𝐚𝐡. Hello.
Hi,
So
so great to be here.
Yes, it's wonderful to have you. And today we are going to talk about the love block effect, which is what she calls it, how to clear your path to love. Because so many of us, I know that I've been there, kept attracting the same partners that are not right for us. And it's so frustrating. And we don't realize that there's things that we can identify and transform within ourselves to make us more of a magnet for the person who's really right for us. And, I know that on this podcast, we talk about that topic because I do have a lot of singles in my audience. And I really want to allow people to, with no shame, and it's nobody's fault, right? But really just go a little deeper and see what we can do that feels empowering to actually have dating not feel frustrating and have it feel inspiring, right? So that's what we're here to talk about.
Absolutely. And, I've been there. I'm sure, Valerie, you totally relate to this yourself. From your past experiences, it is really something that a lot of us have to deal with. And having these kind of conversations, I think, really help.
Exactly. And also because online dating is just so frustrating. I hear so many people throw their hands up and I'm done. And it's like, how do you meet people? And, so it's nice to know what we can actually do that feels empowering.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So let's talk about love blocks. How would you define love blocks and how do they show up in relationships?
So love blocks, the way I see it, Valerie, is anything that's getting in the way of you actually having this happily ever after story. Anything that's getting in the way of relationships turning out well for you, finding the right person, attracting the right person, making the right choices. I mean, the entire process from the time that you think about wanting to be with someone to actually ending up with that person that you spend your life with. I mean, there could be a love block that shows up at any point of that journey. And so these hidden patterns, these barriers, these limitations are almost like subconscious scripts or stories, or you could call them programs that we repeat in our lives. And they come from different aspects of our life, whether that's from our childhood experiences. It could be, family dynamics like dysfunctional family patterns, or even our past relationship history. And these patterns, they influence how we perceive love, how we feel about ourselves, how we interact with people who could be potential partners, and also why we might be drawn to certain relationship dynamics where we feel more pain than love.
Yeah, it's so important to be talking about this because you've just said a lot, that it can look like a limiting belief. It could look like a behavior. It could look like, there's no good people out there, so I'm going to be guarded. Or it could just look like, I'm wanting to make the person like me rather than really being myself, right? And so let's talk about how somebody would know that they have a block. Like, what might that look like?
Well, it would look like relationships that don't work out. It would look like partners that, seem to be similar from relationship to relationship, and they cause you pain in similar ways. For example, if you're always cheated on, that would be a love block, right? If you attract the type of guy who is kind of disrespectful or toxic or even narcissistic, that could be a love block showing up. If you're constantly frustrated, unhappy in your relationships, and you could be in a relationship right now and feel just, like it's a struggle, or you're miserable all the time more than you are happy. These are all, examples of how a love block would show up in your life. And so in any space where it feels like love is hard, love is difficult, love is painful, love is more trouble than it's worth. These are all different kinds of limiting beliefs that we hold about love, and they show up in our experiences of it.
Yeah. And what you're saying is so poignant, because I think that what I used to do, and I know that a lot of people do, when we encounter a love block, like, this is really hard. And I don't, I'm having a hard time because I'm always being criticized, or, I'm with somebody who is just mean to me or whatever. We're going to blame the other person and think that they have to change, rather than recognizing there's something in me that's attracted to that. So do you want to speak more to that?
Absolutely, because that really is the main theme, I think, to the work I do, is helping people take responsibility and personal accountability for everything that's happening in their life that they are not happy with. So you can't change something that is not in your control, right? And you can't change the other person if you keep blaming them for whatever is going wrong in your love life. And so what I do is help people see that it is actually in your control. There are things that you can do to either attract different people or behave differently that invite different behaviors from other people. And so what I do is help you take the power back in your relationships and realize that, you're driving them, whether you are doing that consciously or unconsciously, it's happening. So you might as well, become more aware about what you are doing, what you are putting out there, what you are, the kind of messages you're sending out, and the kind of behaviors that you're inviting in other people. Because one of the first things that my clients see when they start working with me is that, wait a minute, I kept thinking it was them and that person and this person that was, doing something wrong, or had a commitment issue, or had some kind of baggage that was keeping them from really, being able to give me what I want in this relationship, or to love me the way I deserve. And they would look through their relationships and recognize that, hey, I'm kind of like the common denominator in all these relationship challenges or failures. And so maybe it's not them, maybe it's me. And just, having that moment of insight or realization is the moment you take the power back from all your relationship struggles and failures, and you start recognizing that you can do something about this. You can do the inner work, you can make those changes that will completely change your relationship and your relationship experiences.
Yes, yes. And I was smiling earlier, but what I was saying is it's not funny, right? Because it's very painful when we recognize, like, oh my God, I'm the common denominator. Usually people feel embarrassed or ashamed of that, and they probably feel powerless to change it. So let's talk about, maybe it would be helpful to talk about an example, like somebody who you worked with that had a love block, and how did you help them then feel empowered that they could do the inner work, rather than think, oh no, there's something wrong with me,
Yeah, absolutely. And Valerie, if that's okay, I'd love to share my story, because that's pretty much where it all begins, and how this whole, journey started for me as well. Is I was in my 30s and attracting consistently painful relationships, like relationships where I felt like people didn't love me back the way I wanted, or I was always in love with the type of guy who had a commitment issue or was emotionally, unavailable to me. And I remember the frustration, because it was always like every relationship would end up in more heartache and heartbreak than I could at that time handle. And it got to a point where I was just like, it feels hopeless, exactly how you said. I felt powerless, I felt hopeless, and I had all these dreams of meeting that one perfect person and ending up happily ever after, and all of that was just like, oh, I don't think it's going to happen for me. It might happen for other people, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen for me. And of course, that led to a lot of issues with self-esteem and self-worth. I'm not good enough, or trying to change myself to be what somebody else wanted, and constantly trying to fix me from the outside, thinking if I looked different, or I was thinner, or I was more, interesting, then they would love me.
Mm-hmm.
And it got to a point where I just, out of frustration said, well, if no one else is going to love me, maybe I better learn to love myself. And that started my sort of I would almost call it my own like eat, pray, love journey, where I had to kind of find myself and I had to figure out, why was I attracting these kinds of painful relationships? And I really had to go back and unpack my childhood. And I discovered like my ideas of love obviously were influenced and impacted by my parents' relationship, by other relationships I saw growing up, by my own self-worth, self-esteem. And I essentially had to kind of go into my own self, figure out who I am and what was going on. And this is how I discovered that, it was actually an aha moment, I have to say, Valerie. I was, in a healing retreat, and I had this moment of clarity where I realized, oh my God, every single person I've dated has a commitment issue. And I just thought everybody, all the men out there generally had commitment issues. It was just a thing, until I realized maybe it wasn't all the men, maybe it was me. I kept
Mm-hmm.
attracting people. And my block was specifically a commitment issue. As much as I wanted love and I wanted to be happy and I wanted someone who could really see me for who I am, ultimately, I was actually hiding from a relationship. I was hiding from love. And I would find a way to sabotage the relationship or self-destruct right when things were going well. I would find something to fight about, or I would push the person away, or I would make up these stories in my head about, how much the person did or did not care. And so I would almost ruin my own relationships, thinking it was them, but underneath all of it, it was like me sabotaging my own love life. And that moment of clarity when I saw all of this and I saw the truth of it. And I had been doing work for a while at that point, but it was that kind of aha moment that made me realize that, hey, I need to stop blaming other people and take responsibility. And
Absolutely.
that's when, I went through my own process of healing and clearing my blocks, and eventually deciding that this was the area of work I was going to specialize in. And this became my niche. Even though I'd been working with people for over 15 years, it's been about a decade and a half of working with people, but it was really after my own experiences with love that I said, oh my God, this is the area that I want to help people. This is the area that I'm now very good at, because after my realization, I met this guy 2 weeks later at a wedding. He proposed a month later. Okay. And we got married 5 months later. So it was like
Wow.
span of 6 months.
Romance.
I went from single to like soulmate, and I've been with him
Wow.
14 years. We have 3 kids now, and it is honestly the best relationship I've had in my life to date. So,
That
yeah.
is aspirational. I mean, gosh, it just goes to show you how quickly things can transform
Mhm.
when we really have the courage, because that took so much courage for you to look within yourself and realize, wait a minute, I have my own blocks to commitment. I'm the one who's pushing people away. And then, of course, you had to learn how not to do that. So I want to ask you that after, but first, I just want to, reflect on how quickly that happened, because it is very rare. I know probably as we're both relationship coaches, we probably advise people to vet people for vision, values, must-haves, deal breakers. And when it's absolutely right, you just know it. And it sounds like you were already there.
Yeah. Yeah. And, that's such a great question, because I don't want to give people the idea that you have the realization and then it's done, right?
Right.
Because the work is important more than anything. And I had gone from the point I told you where I realized, like, no one is loving me, so I better love myself. I spent some time just working on myself. I went for a lot of different healing courses. I did a lot of work on myself, on love and relationships, the relationship with my family, my childhood, a lot of inner child work, removing limiting beliefs. So I kind of did all the work, and then had this realization, an aha moment. And after that, it really was like within 2 weeks, someone came into my life And a week later, I knew I'm going to marry him. It was kind of just like, oh, I know I'm going to marry him. And when he proposed a month later, I don't think he anticipated proposing that soon either. It was just like he knew and I knew we're going to end up together. So why waste the time?
Yeah.
And it has happened that way for my clients when we do the work. And then, you know, they've gone through this process of just understanding themselves and releasing all these blocks, then yes, you know, they do attract partners very quickly. But I have to stress that it really is the work that I did that led up to the point where it became really easy to attract this person, to know they're the one, because I had a very clear filter at that point. You know, at that point, I'd done enough work that I knew exactly what I want, what it would feel like. My self-worth was like, you know, at an all-time high at that point. And so I wasn't like looking for love.
Right.
I was already full of love for myself. And even when I met my now husband at that point, you know, we met at a wedding, and I remember like he was expressing interest very blatantly. And I was just kind of like, okay, you know, I find you very attractive, but I'm not dying to be in a relationship. And it really was getting to know him and allowing myself to just open up, because I felt safe to do that. I had worked on all those fears. I had worked on all the pain from past relationships, that I wasn't going into it thinking he's going to hurt me, he's going to lie, he's going to cheat, because those are things I've been through. Right. But I had done all the clearing work that I wasn't afraid of that. I trusted myself completely. And so when I knew, I actually experienced this in a meditation, that, okay, this is the person I'm going to marry, it was just, I trusted myself to make that right decision. And I've never looked back. You know, I've never had any doubts about, was this the right person? I have spent, you know, the last 14 years knowing I made the right choice, and I couldn't have made a better choice for myself. He really is the person. And I would love to highlight this, is he loves me more than I even could love myself. And I think you have to get to a point where you really love yourself to attract somebody who can love you that way too, because you'll only allow yourself to shine and allow those qualities and traits you love about yourself to come across to somebody else when you embrace it and you accept every aspect of yourself.
Yeah, I love what you're saying. You know, it is so inspirational.
Thank you.
Of course, I agree that when we remove all of our blocks to fully, I like to say that love is not something that we create. It's something that we open up to receiving, you know, from the universe, whatever you believe in. And we have blocks to receiving it. And those are the limiting beliefs. Those are our past hurts that we haven't grieved and released. You know, those are our habits of, let's say, putting other people first, et cetera, that just become wired into our nervous system. Or it could just be that we're stressed out all the time and not actually feeling our feelings. You know, all of those blocks, when we remove those, which it sounds like for you, you were dedicated. And so it happened for you relatively quickly. And now you can streamline the path for other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, the funny thing is, Valerie, like, I think because relationships was always my pain point, like it was my struggle. Love has been my struggle from, I would say, almost childhood. You know, this is something that has been the theme in my life, whether it's a relationship with a partner or relationships with other people. Love, relationships has kind of been something that shows up over and over again as something that teaches me a lot of lessons, a lot of things that I need to learn to grow. And so in my practice of working with people, I've always attracted women. I've always attracted women who struggle with love and relationships, right? Because we always attract things that we've either overcome or we feel very passionate about. So in my practice, I've been attracting these kind of people, and I would work with them on whatever challenge would come up, not necessarily always specifically on their relationship or specifically on, you know, their love life, but I would always work on self-love, because that is something that I think is very, very important. And I would help them, overcome whatever was the challenge they'd bring to me at that time. And in my work with them, a lot of them would come back to me and be like, Sanaiyah, you know how we did those sessions? Well, I met somebody a month later or 2 months later, and now we're engaged or we're married, or, and I would run into people. And this has been like over a decade of time where they'd come back and tell me that we did this work and then they attracted their partner. And some of them were people where we really did work on that issue. And some of them were people we worked on other issues, self-esteem, self-worth, whatever it may have been at that time. And so I realized that there are specific things I keep working on with my clients that does lead them to find love and to find fulfilling relationships. And that is sort of how this has kind of been my area of, I would say this is kind of like my superpower. This is what I do really well. This is, coming from my own journey, I really help people attract their soulmates. I help people go from single to in a relationship for life. This is kind of my my passion.
I can really feel that, as I was saying before we were talking, I was just saying your energy just feels so vibrant. And as you're talking about this, we can just tell that this is your passion. And, I know, that's why you call yourself a relationship reinvention coach, not just a love and relationship coach, because it really is reinventing our relationship with what love is.
Yes. And with ourselves, with our, potential future partner. And if you're in a relationship, it is also about reinventing the relationship you're in.
Yeah. No, exactly. Because, we're talking about singles now, but I'm sure when you work with people that are in a relationship, it's about really, of course, it always has to do with our relationship with ourselves, but then it's reinventing the vision. What is possible? What is the purpose? What are we here to, experience and create together?
Yeah. Yes. And the love block, Valerie, like whether you're in a relationship or you're single, right? Your love blocks are still something you've been carrying, and they will show up creating conflict, or they will show up pushing people away. Yes. So whichever way it shows up, it's still these blocks that we carry that are getting in the way of us really accepting and receiving love, but also giving love to other people freely.
Exactly. Yes. And so let's, get a little bit more specific, because I think people are probably wondering, okay, so I've identified a block. Let's say it's a limiting belief, or let's say it's a habit, or let's say it's pain from the past that I'm still holding on to. What are the steps that you take people through to remove those so that they are then learning how to fully love and accept themselves and be love?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to roll back a little bit, because what I found is that depending on what kind of block you have, it's a slightly different path. For example, if you have, I've come up with kind of personalities that represent each of these hidden love patterns or blocks. And for me, there's about 5 major categories, because I've worked with over 5,000 women at this point. And I realized I would see the same thing over and over again. Right. And when I kind of just took all my past sessions, my notes, and just kind of tried to organize it, I realized, wow, they really do fall into these 5 different categories. And for example, one of them is where you've been hurt over and over again with love. Someone keeps breaking your heart. And so love is something that doesn't feel safe. So I call that kind of person a runaway bride. It's like you want to be married to someone, you want to have that happily ever after, but right when you're about to get to the wedding, you jump on the horse and you run away. So it's like someone who's constantly afraid of getting hurt. And when it gets too close, you run away or you sabotage.
Right. Or they do get married, but then because they're holding on to past hurt, they can't really be vulnerable with their partner.
Exactly. Which affects intimacy, right. Which affects the sex life. It affects so many different aspects of the relationship. Right. And so if I have someone who is that kind of personality when it comes to their love block, then what I do is I really do a lot of work with inner child. It's very inner child specific, because there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of hurt. And every time they are feeling vulnerable, it brings up the inner child.
Right.
And there's a lot of fear. So I do a lot of work with fear. So every type of love block, I use a slightly different path, which is more uniquely kind of fit to or tailored to the kind of, I would say, consequences of holding this kind of love block, right? Or if someone is a commitment phobe, which is my biggest love block, then learning how to commit to yourself. And how would you do that? So it's really focused on building trust, committing to yourself, figuring out, you know, what's the worst that would happen if you were in a committed relationship. What is that one fear? So you'll see themes like we are working with fear, we are working with hurt, we are working with childhood, but it's slightly different based on, you know, the type of love block a person tests for. I put people through a love block quiz actually, and it helps me understand what is their love block. And then based on that, I have a sort of prescription or prescribed way of how to deal with those particular blocks and how they manifest in their life.
Yes, exactly. And I know that that quiz is part of your free gift. So I look forward to talking about that at the end, because I know that a quiz would have helped me. You know, I think I had a lot of blocks when I was dating, you know, and I had to learn all my own tools to work through them. And thankfully I did, but, you know, it would have helped me at the time to have somebody streamline the process for me, you know, which is why we shorten the learning curve for other people.
Right? Like I would have never even entertained the idea that I had the commitment issue, but had I done a quiz that said I'm a commitment phobe, like I would have been like, I would have thought about that. Maybe I would have journaled on it. Maybe I would have said, okay, if I have a commitment issue, let me get someone to help me with that. But if we don't see the problem within ourselves, right, we just keep blaming other people and trying to find someone who we think, you know, would be different. But of course, that rarely ever happens.
Exactly. Yep, I know. And I wouldn't have known that I was scared of getting hurt because I hadn't felt hurt in my relationships as an adult. It was my childhood stuff that I had to work through. You know, I'm laughing, but it's like I had to do a ton of inner child work in order to learn that it was safe, you know, to be vulnerable with men when I was an adult. So it's like we don't realize what our blocks are unless, you know, our eyes point outward. They don't unless we have some kind of structure in order, you know, which your quiz is sounds like a great structure in order to really be able to see ourselves more deeply.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you get that.
Yes, of course. Which, you know, that's why we support people. And so I know that you don't have time to go into all 5 now, but maybe you can share some quick tips that if people recognize that they have a block, what are some things that they can do now to begin to work through them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I talked a little bit about the commitment phobe, which is building trust, committing to yourself first, because you can't commit to anyone else if you won't commit to yourself. Then we've got the runaway bride, where I mentioned, you know, love is hard, love is painful. You're running away from it, even though you think you're running to it, but you're actually running away from it. So this is fear of vulnerability, fear of intimacy, and just being aware of how you are, you know, sabotaging your relationships, why you're doing this, where this might be coming from, could really level up sort of the game for you if you go into a relationship being more self-aware. The other pattern is the people pleaser. This is where you think that you always have to make someone else happy. You change yourself to fit the other person's kind of requirements or expectations. You're constantly seeking approval. You sometimes are taken for granted. So that's the people pleaser. And again, learning to prioritize yourself, but also understanding, where did the people pleasing come from? Chances are, you know, you had to people please to survive certain situations in your life. So really unpacking, because if you don't get to the bottom of why you exhibit certain behavior or you act in a certain way, then it's very difficult to remove it. So there needs to be kind of an understanding, a forgiveness or a release, or a process of healing from those traumatic experiences that needs to come in. Then we've got the caretaker. This is where you think that everyone else's sort of happiness or well-being as your responsibility. And sometimes you even take on the responsibility, let's say, of your parents or other people, and then put yourself almost at the bottom of the list. And so you don't seek out love for yourself. You just take care of other people. Okay. And often you are someone who makes a good friend, who's always there for other people. But when people don't need you, they kind of abandon you, or they leave you. And that could show up in friendships and relationships and lots of different aspects of your life. Then you've got the very last one, which I call the memory chaser. This is where you're stuck in, you know, the one that got away, or past relationship regrets, or you keep comparing a new person to someone that, you know, you dated and it ended, and you have glorified that relationship without seeing it for what it truly was, which is, wasn't a good fit. It wasn't a, you know, a healthy relationship, but you're stuck there.
Right.
And you've, you know, in your head built it up to be something that it's not. And so you are stuck in the past, chasing memories that actually are almost an illusion, you know, a shell of what they really were. And so between these 5 love blocks, just gaining the awareness and starting to, you know, understand that, hey, these are themes, or these are situations in my life, and then matching this I would say love block type and behavior to what you have experienced in your relationships, and starting to see these correlations can open up a lot of hope, a sense of empowerment, that, hey, you know, this is something I'm doing, but that means I can change it. There is a way to release it, or get through this, or, you know, get the guidance and support I need to release this block, so I don't have to keep creating these kinds of negative relationship experiences for myself.
Yeah, yeah. And thank you. That is a very comprehensive list. And I'm sure that I know that I've had a lot of those blocks in my previous history. You know, when I was single, and even when my audience probably knows I used to pick men who were easygoing, you know, so they wouldn't trigger me. But then, of course, that was out of a block. You know, not that they weren't wonderful people, they just weren't a good match for me. So we tend to choose the wrong partners out of these blocks too. So once somebody identifies a block, of course, you know, they can take your quiz. And of course, I know that you have your whole signature program called the Soulmate Magnet, that you can help women overcome those blocks. Do you have any quick tips that people can come away from this, you know, to try on their own?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing you can do is, of course, become aware of what the block is, and start observing how you behave. And just being aware might allow you to make different choices. Like, you might find yourself doing something that you know is self-destructive, and you might say, wait a minute, this is just my runaway bride acting up, and I'm not going to do this. I'm going to take a step back. So it is kind of having the awareness and making better choices, choosing your behaviors, like choosing to respond to situations rather than reacting to situations, because now you have more information and understanding of yourself. So I think that could be really helpful. I do take people through a program called Soulmate Magnet, which I do one-to-one and as a group program, a group coaching program. And what I put people through is a process of releasing the past, loving and accepting their present, which is themselves, in order to then manifest and attract your future. So really, just, even if you were to do this on your own, focusing on your healing process, focusing, you know, which is something you've done yourself, as you went through a journey of just working through your blocks that you became aware of, and working on self-love, learning to kind of love yourself, show love to yourself in a way that you know how to receive it. Really just embracing all the perhaps shadows or the faults and flaws that you see in yourself, and learning to transform them into things that you actually love and accept, or you honor or respect about yourself. And then finally becoming really, really clear on what you want in a partner, in a relationship.
Mhm.
I take people through this powerful manifestation process, but if you have your own way of attracting what you want, or your own ritual, your own practice, really, but only doing that once you've done the clearing,
Yeah.
making sure you really, really love yourself, like your self-esteem, self-worth, you want it to be at like as close to, 100% committed to myself before you do the practice of calling someone in. Because
Yes.
if not, you're just going to call someone in who reflects your unresolved issues. So I always tell my students and my clients and anyone I speak to that you always attract your energetic equivalent.
Right.
Like you're attracting someone who's as, who's holding on to as much baggage as you are, but maybe different kind of baggage, but really you attract who you are. So the key or the secret to attracting this amazing person is becoming this amazing version of yourself, right? Becoming the highest expression of who you can be, cleared from all that baggage, free from all those limitations you've imposed on yourself or other people have imposed on you, just kind of being a clean slate, and then attracting someone who is as self-aware, as cleaned up, as, emotionally available and ready to give and receive the way you are. And that almost makes all the difference in getting to a happily ever after story in your life.
Yes, absolutely. And I know a lot of people watching or listening might be curious about, because it's kind of a paradox, right? We have to love and accept ourselves. And at the same time, we're learning and growing. And as we learn and grow, we're never going to be what our inner critic thinks is perfect. And so, how do you know that you are fully loving and accepting yourself?
Absolutely. So I like to say that you are a masterpiece and also a work in progress.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so many of our, famous artists, they create these amazing, beautiful paintings and they keep adding to it and they keep making it better and brighter and so on. And that's really how artists paint, is they're constantly, and a lot of them don't really have a finished painting until long after they die, right? I mean, that's when a lot of these famous artworks have come out and they're like the finished versions. But
Mm-hmm.
I like to think of ourselves that way, as we are beautiful, we are a masterpiece, and loving and accepting yourself and recognizing, hey, I am this amazing person, but yes, there's a lot of room for me to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And it shows up in the way you approach challenges in your life. It shows up in your kind of inner dialogue. So for example, if I do something where I'm not quite happy with the outcome, maybe I don't think I did my very best, or I don't think it came out the way I wanted it to, okay, then loving myself would say, all right, how can I do this better? What do I need to maybe learn? What skill do I need to work on? What, do I need to get a coach for this particular aspect of what I'm doing? How can I improve what I delivered so I can do a better job? Not because I did a bad job,
Mm-hmm.
not because I'm not good enough,
Right.
not because I'm not worthy of it, right? But because I want to do the best I can, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I can do better than this. I want to do better than this. And it comes from that place of just, feeling really aligned with your purpose and your passion, and just coming from the space of just love instead of fear or negativity, or constantly trying to find something wrong with yourself, which is what shows up when the inner critic has the upper hand in our life. So it just looks different when you come from a space of love. You're kinder, you're gentle, you're compassionate, you're more growth oriented, rather than stuck in this loop or cycle of beating yourself up for something that didn't go the way you wanted it to.
I think that's a really good example, because it does show up in our self-talk and also in how we feel towards all parts of ourselves. And when we know that, because we do attract people. I mean, I want to hear your thoughts on this. We attract people who treat us the way that we treat ourselves. So if we beat ourselves up, we'll tend to attract somebody who's critical, and that's just the way it works. And so it really comes down to how are we treating ourselves?
Absolutely. And there's a quote I love by a poet. Her name is Rupi Kaur, and she says, "How you love yourself teaches other people how to love you." So it's almost like you're out there telling people, well, I beat myself up all the time with these, negative or critical comments. So you can do the same thing to me too. Or I'm always prioritizing other people over myself. So you can do that too. Go ahead, because I'm doing it anyways. So if you allow yourself to do that to you, you allow other people to do that to you. So it's kind of like, well, am I going to honor my boundaries? If I honor my boundaries, then I'll make sure somebody else honors and respects my boundaries as well. So it has to start with the relationship with yourself. And so I like to say that the most important relationship is the relationship you have with yourself. And that essentially mirrors out or reflects out into every relationship. It teaches other people how to love you. It teaches other people how to treat you. And it also, I would say, almost it propels you to, attract the same kind of relationships in your life as the one you have with yourself. And that's something we want to do the work to make sure we're attracting what we want and not what we don't want.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you just shared some amazing tips. And I think the best way to, really bring this home is because you've shared such an inspiring story of your own journey, which is, aspirational. Maybe you could share a story of a client that you worked with so that people can know it's possible.
Absolutely. So I've worked with a lot of people with different kinds of blocks, but most of them have this common theme of not loving themselves enough. Mm-hmm. And one of my clients that I worked with, so she grew up with a mom who she had to take care of. Okay, so she had this whole caretaker situation going on where she would then attract partners into her life, and she actually attracted pretty good men. But she was never able to be really vulnerable or open with them because her mom had a lot of sort of mental health issues. So as she's taking care of her mom, she's constantly feeling pain and hurt because her mom can't control the way she behaves with her daughter. And so she's grown up taking care of her mom. Her mom's her responsibility. Plus, love was very painful with her mom. Okay. Having said that, she had a father who was very loving. And so she would attract loving men, mm-hmm. but because her relationship with her mom was troubled, she would have these barriers and she would never really open up to any man.
Right.
And so what happened is we worked through these different relationships in her life, her father, her mother. We went through and did something what I call is a relationship inventory to look at the patterns in her relationships. And I have a specific process of doing that. And we went through the 3-step process of soulmate magnet. And what started to happen already in the work we were doing is she started to get a lot of attention from different kinds of men. So she would kind of attract men that she didn't have to be so available to or so open with. It was almost like she would break up with them because she didn't have to be so open. She didn't have to be so vulnerable with them. And then she would break up after a while. So suddenly she started to attract men who were seeking her emotional kind of investment into the relationship. So they started asking, the kind of men she started to attract were asking different things of her. And she felt like, wow, these are people I can actually connect with. These are people that maybe I do feel safe opening up more to. And as we were working on her relationship with her mother and doing the healing work and the trauma and the inner child and the forgiveness, she started to feel more comfortable with opening up to men. Mm-hmm. And we started to see that she had put down boundaries with her mom that she didn't have before. Her relationship with her brother changed because there were elements of that relationship where love didn't feel safe. Okay. And so in the work we were doing, suddenly her and her brother started to get really close in a way that they hadn't. And she felt so much more safer with him than she did previously. She started to feel more comfortable with herself, more forgiving, because she was also very critical of herself because her mom was critical of herself. So we did so much work that affected her in many different aspects of her life. But most importantly, she started to open up to love. And she started to attract, like literally one after another. She told me, oh, I went to go just be, go do sauna. And I met this person there, and she would go somewhere else and she'd run into another guy who was like, so they start like literally she became this soulmate magnet where everywhere she went, she was attracting men who were very different from the kind of men that she would attract. And we had also worked on exactly what she wanted in her relationship, that she wasn't saying yes to just anybody. She was very clear about what she was looking for, what she wanted, and she knew her value and her worth. And so it kind of eliminated all that time we waste and trying to see if this relationship is going to go somewhere or if this is the right person for me, because she really knew, just as I did, what was right for her. And I've had, so many of my clients tell me that, like one in particular, 2 months after working with me, she's a client from Australia, and she was out watching the fireworks on New Year's Eve by herself because she's so comfortable with herself that she was sitting there and there was another guy there, and they just started talking, and they talked the entire night. And they've been in a relationship now for over, I think we're going on 8 months, because it was New Year's Eve that everything started. They've been together for 8 months now. And she said, Sanaiyah, this is nothing like any relationship I've been in. We've met each other's parents. She moved to be with him. It feels like their purpose is aligned. And these are the kind of stories that come out of the people I work with, is that when you do that work, it changes your relationship with not only yourself, but everybody else in your life. It opens up these opportunities. So even the one I just told you about, where she met someone watching fireworks, is, her career went back on track. And it turns out that this partner she attracted is very aligned with sort of her purpose and career. So it's more than just finding someone to date. It's about finding like the right person, that kind of person who complements you, and someone who is, as I would say, empowered in love as you are. And so that's really kind of what I see happening when I take people through this process, which starts from, discovering what your love block is, and then doing the work to clear it, to release it, to move on, and becoming the kind of person who can attract the kind of person you want to be with.
Yes, of course, because that's what we want, is to not waste any more time and actually attract the person who's truly right for us, so that we can experience that soul shaking love connection, that this is about. And, that because, and, that's what this podcast is about, of course, is that mind, body, and spirit connection with yourself first, which is what you're so good at demonstrating. So I really feel inspired. And also, you said this woman was from Australia. I know you work with a more global audience as well, since you have lived many places in the world. And so do you want to talk about that?
Yes, absolutely. Apologies to interrupt you, but yes, absolutely. So I grew up in Japan and Dubai, and I lived in the US and London and the Philippines. And so I've kind of been around. And as a result, I've been working with people from across the globe. I work with people in different countries, different backgrounds, different cultures. And they all actually share the same kind of love blocks wherever they're from. But of course, depending on your background and influences, it might look a little bit different. And I think that coming from all these different cultures and countries gives me that lens to be able to really understand people within the dynamics of their culture and their upbringing and where they're from. And so really wherever you are in the world, I work with really any time zone and any kind of background, in case that feels like it might be something you need to wonder about.
Yeah. And I think that is, not only do you have such a practical perspective to be able to coach people from different cultures, but because you're not in the US currently, you can work with people in many time zones. And that's something that, I mean, I personally only work with mostly people in the US and Europe, some people from Australia, because there's such a big time difference. But, you know, I'll know to refer people who might be in other time zones to you. So I think that that is also advantageous, and I encourage everybody to, take that into account. And I would love to hear about where people can get started with this work by taking your quiz.
Absolutely. So they can go to my website. It's sanaiyahgurnamall.com /love-blocks-quiz. And I know you're probably going to tag it in the show notes or the description. And so if you just go on to the quiz, it's pretty easy quiz to take, and it should give you some great insight into your behaviors, why you behave that way. I do end with some tips that are very tailored to your love block. So it's not just about what is your love block, but specifically what are the themes for you? What are the challenges? What are the things that you need to work on specifically for your love block? I do give you that in your results. So it is, I would say, the best first step, but I also do take people in for calls. If you are interested in talking to me, learning a little bit more about my process or what I can do, you can book a Manifest Love Discovery call with me. And I know you have that link, and you can tag that link as well.
Yes, I will definitely put that link, both links. I think, yes, I will. I have the link to the quiz, and so I will get the link to the call, because I think that both are wonderful opportunities. And I will put both links below the video if you're watching this on YouTube, and I'll also put it in the show notes if you're listening to it in a podcast platform. So just click the show notes, and it'll be, under the podcast description will be the free gifts, because I think that this is very generous of you and very tailored, because I love that you've narrowed it down to 5 possible types of blocks that people can have. And then also how you share tips right away that you can start to work through them. Because I think, oh, see, you just gave me the link, so I would post it below. It's very important that we not only have the insight to know what the blocks are, but then we feel empowered to take action right away to start to remove them, because, we don't want you to feel stuck. And so that's why we do this work, to help you feel more empowered. And so I'm just, wow, you have just shared such a gem of, all these nuggets of information. And I know that if I was single, I would feel really inspired about my, soulmate, who is out there, which I do believe that if I'm looking for him, assuming I want to attract a man, then he's also looking for me. And it's just about removing my blocks to discovering, following our intuition and getting ourselves out there and being available. But we have to be available to ourselves first. So I love all the things you're saying.
Beautifully said as well. So thank you, Valerie. That was perfect.
Yes, yes. And, I think that the feeling of love is perfect, although obviously we have blocks that distort it. But I like to say that, when we remove the blocks, it's kind of like that wabi-sabi concept, where if you like break a vase and you glue it back together, that it's more beautiful because of the ways that it has been broken, because that makes it unique, and that it's stronger in the places that it was broken, and it thrives, even more fully. So I think, that is us as human beings, and we can have love no matter what.
I love that. I love the way you said that. It just, that was very inspiring and empowering as well.
Yeah, well, you inspired me. So I hope that everybody, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and I can't wait to hear people's comments and questions. Feel free to post them below, and um, I encourage people to take the quiz, and I just hope that everybody has a day that's filled with self-love and self-acceptance and clarity about how to attract that love that you desire and deserve, because we all do. So till next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.